I wanted to come back on and just talk to you a little bit more about utilization. So, for part two of utilization, how utilization benefits you and saves you money. So, the benefits of utilization are actually many. Kind of like we talked about yesterday, it should help everyone involved: patients, organizations, companies in general, vendors. It should help everybody reduce costs, reduce denials, reduce claims, and steward resources for better efficiency and better data. And that was a lot of what I did as a utilization manager, was review data. So I would review reports showing what patients needed, what patients had, if it was appropriate for their level of care, if we tried alternates first, if it was in line with the recommendations from our vendor, things like that. So how does it save money? So basically, when you have a process that you're following and you're going through that process to determine the right course of treatment, the right duration at the right cost, it can kind of establish a baseline for you, and provide some consistent information about the types of services you need. So it saves money by establishing a contracted rate. So you can lower your contracted rate if you do some utilization research and figure out, wow, we're only using $5 a day and we're paying $10 a day. So you can go back to your contracted vendor and say, hey, I want to negotiate down to $7. It's been, almost a year. We've worked with you for 2020 and now, 2021, and we're going into 22, and I want to negotiate down to $7 because we're consistently hitting at 5. And so it can save your organization money, and recapture lost revenue that way. It evaluates the current treatments and covered medications, so supplies, services, PPDs. When I say PPD, I mean patient per diem, or patient per day rate. Most contracts that I know of go by a patient per day rate. So every patient you have is charged that rate. So this is hard for a lot of people to understand. If you have a contract that's a PPD rate, you are being charged $5 a day or whatever. Let's say your contracted rate is $5, just to keep it simple. Your rate is $5 a day. Even if the patient doesn't use that service, let's say it's DME, so it's equipment. Even if there's a patient with no equipment, they have their own equipment, you're still paying $5 a day. So if you have 100 patients, you're paying $5 a day for all of them, even if only 80 of them actually use equipment, because that's the agreed upon contracted rate to cover all equipment needs. And that's very common. So that's not a shady way of doing business. So it establishes that appropriate level of payment for those services across the board for all patients. That way, when you have an admission and you order DME, you already know all of your admissions are appropriately covered under that contract. You don't have to add another patient to that contract in order to get that service, if that makes sense. It's going to determine the care and services that are covered. So, like, let's say for hospice, you're gonna know that, or for palliative care, you're gonna know that anything related to comfort is covered. So you already know all pain meds are covered. You already know all anxiety meds are covered. You already know all diabetic medications are not covered because that's not related to comfort. So in that sense of the analogy, so you can determine through that utilization process what your covered services related to what you provide is. So you provide these medications related to these services. And that's how Medicare bills hospice. So I realize that doesn't apply to everybody, but you can apply that in other ways to private pay individuals. It's basically determining what things are under the umbrella of what your services cover and what you can procure and what you will provide for your patients. What supplies will you cover? Will you cover 100% of every supply that they need? Most don't. Most hospices don't. So you kind of have to use that to determine, okay, up to this amount or up to this threshold, these are the supplies that we are going to provide. And that's a lot of what we'll talk about on the workshop, the utilization workshop, and how you can go through all of your areas and implement different processes to kind of catch those areas where you can be bleeding out revenue and not realize it. Some of the challenges with that, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to review your revenue, and you have to look at what you were billed versus what you used. But it also should help you catch errors in billing. You should catch errors in billing with vendors or invoices, or like we talked about, patients that have already discharged, or patients that aren't on service anymore, or passed away, or transferred, and you may be still paying a per diem or a billed item from their pharmacy for them. So those are the things that it's very easy to miss that I want to make sure you know how to catch. So those are going to be the things that we'll be talking about on that utilization workshop coming up. So I'm really excited about that. I think it's going to be really helpful for everybody. And hopefully this video was helpful as well, and you have a better understanding of what utilization is and how it can help you. If you have any questions just based on what we've talked about, just let me know. I'd love to help answer that or clarify anything that was confusing for you. So just drop a comment there and I'll make sure I answer it to the best of my ability. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.